Hey y'all, I'm James Wright and welcome to Wood by Wright 2. Today we are making this picture frame, and this is actually a scratch-off map of the United States with all 50 states. It's one of our goals to have our kids go to all 50 states before they go to college. So we'll see if that happens, but right now we're going to focus on making this frame. And it's two pieces. They call this mahogany. It's not a sapele or an African mahogany or anything like that. I really don't know what it is. It's really soft. But it works really nicely, so we'll use that. And then the outside is alder. I kind of like the contrast between the two of those. Fairly subtle, but yeah, we're going to have a little bit of fun showing how to do all the steps to make this frame. So let's dive in and take a look at that. Now, one of the first things I want to do is actually create a groove in the piece of alder, and this groove is the same thickness as the secondary wood I'm going to be using. So the alder is about 1.5 inches by about 3/4, and the secondary wood's the same as well. So we're going to be carving this out, and I'm just using a 3/4 inch plow plane. This is actually a Stanley 45, I think it was, or did I say 55? It's a 45. And running it down, really simple thing, and it's really fun to do. Just going until it stops like that, when you can tell it hit its step stop, and it's going all the way down. Now I want to put a bull nose on the front of this, and so I'm going to be using a round to shape that on one side. And the round is slightly the wrong radius, so I'll be going until I get close to it, and then I'll shift it up a little ways, and then I'll shift it down a little ways until I get close to that radius I want, and then I'm going to finish it off with a card scraper and bring it down to exactly what I want. I just love the way these curls come out. Just incredibly fun. Speaking of that card scraper, run it down, smooth it out, and one of the problems with alder is it's a bit softer, and it's hard to get the card scraper to work just right on it, so I find hitting it with a little bit of sandpaper does the trick. Next thing I want to do is work on the secondary wood. This is the one they call mahogany, but it's not. I want to actually do a beading run on it, and so there's two beads side by side, about 1/4 inch in. And so I have that set up in the Stanley 55, and you can see them here running along side by side. I just like the way it adds a little bit of detail. The problem with them is they're a little bit deep, and this is so soft that it left a little bit of fuzzy on them. So I came in with a bit of sandpaper and hit them in the tight corners. The last piece I want to put on there is a chamfer all the way along the inside edge of the frame. So we have the beads and then a chamfer on the outside. So for that, I just kind of put it between two dogs at a 45-degree angle, and then ran the block plane down around it, eyeballing about what I look for. And I'm not wanting it to be perfectly straight, I just want it to be close to it. Oh, I lied. The last thing we have to actually do is on the inside of this, we have to make a rabbet for the glass, or in this case, the picture to fit into. And that's about 1/4 inch deep by about 3/8 wide. So for this, I'm using a moving Philister plane. I could have used a Stanley 45 or anything else, but I had one of these on hand, so I really enjoy using this whenever I get a chance for it. Plus, I wanted to use as many different planes on this as I possibly could. Then I had to come in and clean that up a little bit. I left a little bit of mess from the corner of the rabbet in there, so using a shoulder plane just fixes that up nicely. Now we have this groove that we can put the other stick into, fill it with some glue, put some glue on the other stick as well, and they'll pop into place, creating the profile of the frame. And that's about it for the frame construction. It's a really straightforward and fun way to do with a lot of little detail, and I like how it came out. For clamping, I just used a bunch of spring clamps, hold it in there. It doesn't need a lot of clamping. It's a fairly solid joint for what it has. There's not going to be much of any structural problems on it. Now for the picture, I need to back it with a piece of thin board, and so I had this scrap of Luan lying around, and I figured I would mark that out. Marked out exactly the size it is on the picture, and then we can cut it to size. And cutting Luan with a handsaw just feels really weird, but it cuts really quickly and really easily, as you can see here. Just had a crosscut saw and ripped it down, cut it across, and there is the piece that I need. It's about I think it's 24 by 17 inches. Fairly straightforward. Then I need to glue the picture on, and we're going to be using some Super 77. I let it spray it on both sides, let it sit for a little while until it gets tacky, and then apply it on. A very simple method. Just make sure it's where you want it, because as soon as it touches, it's on. Then wipe it down, kind of squeegee out any of the lumps, and let it sit. Had to come back and touch a few spots, but there we go. Now let's actually do the framework here, we need to cut the 45s on it. And so I have this 45-degree square that allows me to mark out precisely where one end is. And I mark that off at 45 and then just freehand cut it. I could have put it in a jig, but because this trim had all these weird angles, it wouldn't sit quite right. And there's no reason not to. If you have a line you can see to, you can cut to it. Then I marked the length that I need on the shelf, cut it on there, and then I can check it again with the 45 and trim it up, bring it to exactly what I'm looking for with the plane, bringing it right down to those lines that I drew. Low angle plane works really well.
Pretty darn close.
Now that we have the angles on these cut, we can check them against each other. And this will allow me to make sure that the two long rails are exactly the same length and the two short rails are exactly the same length. So once one set is cut, then we can use those to mark the other set. Make sure that they're all 45 degrees. We can put it together and see how close they actually are. One of the best ways to actually test how close together they are is to put the two corners together and then put a square on it and see, do the 45 and 45 equal 90. In this case I was really happy. Some of them weren't exactly where I wanted to, and that's not a problem because you can always go back and clean them up with a plane. Just remember, if you shorten one board, you're going to have to shorten the other one, otherwise it'll become a rhombus rather than a rectangle. And I have these picture frame clamps that work really well. And I'll clamp it up in that and do a dry run, make sure everything is right. Here you can see there's a little bit of gap in there, so I can just go back, trim them up, and then we are ready for glue up. Once it's all in place and I'm happy with it. For this one, I'm not going to be doing any fancy doweling or joinery inside. I'm just going to glue them up and then put some steel brackets in the corner. But I had to find those steel brackets. I couldn't remember where I put them. I ended up going and buying more, and I still can't find where I put the other ones. So I put glue on both sides of each joint, slide the boards together, and clamp them in place. Once they are clamped in place, then I flip the whole thing over, and I can drive in the cleats to support the corners, and then let it dry. I just make sure that I drive these in while it is still wet, so there's a little bit of movement, and then we're good to go. The next thing is just trimming up everything, making sure that all the joints and corners fit. And so I'm going to come in and do a little bit of chisel work, make sure that all of the angles match up, cleaning up anything that's still left inside, if there's any glue in the corners, and then planing the outside down so it's nice and smooth. Just that little detail work that makes a big difference. And some of the corners of the roundovers didn't match up perfectly because they were finished with a card scraper. That's no problem at all, because I can just come in with that card scraper and make them match. And it actually goes pretty quickly, and you get these really nice, clean fitting lines that are precise because they were, well, shaped to match each other. Then I'm just going to do the last minute sanding on a few things with the alder, and then into those small grooves left from the beading plane, and we're ready for finish. I'm just putting on a boiled linseed oil and paste wax finish. There's really not any need for anything durable on this, so this actually worked pretty well. And then every year or so I'll slap on another coat of oil and it will be refreshed and pretty looking. So it's a very simple and easy finish. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, I have several videos on it. You can search for Wood by Wright boiled linseed oil and you'll come up with several of them. It's actually one of those topics I've done several times. Now that we've put the oil on it, we can let it sit until it stops soaking in more oil. We can come back and wipe off the excess and then apply the paste wax, and it's basically done. We just need to apply the hardware. And for this I'm using a simple bracket. Use a pair of needle nose pliers to hold them in place before tapping them down in. And now we're ready to install the picture. And for this, rather than using like glazing points or anything like that, I just decided to use some finish nails. Drive them in a little bit of an angle, and it allows you to bend them down and push the frame into close, the picture into close contact with the frame. And that's about it. Now let's go have some fun with the kids. So we can actually go through with the kids and scratch off all the states that they've been to. This is a fun time because I could do a little geography with them. And this is where you were born, and these are where we went and did here, and we used to live there. And remember when we went on that vacation, we went over here, and they got to actually see this. And so now in the future we can look at the map and say, yeah, we're going over here. And so they can actually get an idea about where they're going and what things are in relationship. and just kind of a fun thing for the whole family. Yeah, we had a good time with this one.
Where do you want to go next? Can I go up here to Minnesota? So, there you have it. This was a really fun one for me. It took a little longer than we expected as we ended up doing it over a couple weeks, but I like how it came out, and I'm looking forward to doing some of the scratch off with the kids. So, I hope you like this. If you did, please let me know your thoughts, comments, questions, any ideas you have down below. I'd love to see those. So I think that's about it for today, and until next time, have a wonderful day. This image states that we haven't been to any.